I thought you were dead. You are supposed to be dead. That was the first thing Christy said when I walked through the front door of the house we used to share. No scream. No hug. No falling to her knees in shock or running into my arms. Just those words, sharp, cold, and hollow. Her voice didn't crack. Her hands didn't shake. She just stood there, looking at me like I was a ghost. And maybe I was. The man beside her froze like a deer caught in headlights, shirtless, holding a coffee mug. His eyes darted from me to her, and back. Christy didn't move. She just kept staring at me. You were supposed to be dead, she repeated, this time quieter, like she was speaking to herself. Like my return had ruined something. Before we begin today's unforgettable story, welcome to Whispers of Reality, where real-life inspired stories come to life with raw emotion, suspense, and powerful truths. From heartbreaking betrayals to jaw-dropping comebacks, shocking secrets to soul-stirring moments, every story on this channel is a whisper from reality itself. These aren't just stories, they're experiences you'll feel. If you believe in the power of storytelling and love content that moves, inspires, and keeps you coming back for more, make sure to hit that subscribe button, tap the bell icon so you never miss an episode. Like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth behind today's tale. Now, sit back, open your heart, and let the whispers begin. My name is Nat. I was a staff sergeant in the United States Army. I left Ohio nearly 4 years ago for a deployment that was supposed to last 12 months. I came back after 42 months. But I didn't come back to my home. I came back to a house I couldn't recognize. To a woman I no longer knew and to a life that had moved on without me. When I first enlisted, Christy had cried the night I left. She held on to my shirt like letting go would tear her heart in half. We had been married 6 years by then, no kids, just dreams, buying our first house, taking road trips, getting a dog. She made me promise to write, and I did. I wrote to her every week. Sometimes twice. But somewhere between the sand and silence, things changed. A year into my deployment, everything went black. We were on a covert recon mission in the outskirts of Kost when our unit got ambushed. Gunfire had erupted from every angle. Screams I still hear when I close my eyes. Some of my brothers died. Others were captured. I was listed as MIA, missing in action. But I wasn't dead. Not yet. A shepherd family found me 2 days later, bleeding, unconscious, and barely alive. They took me in, nursed me for months. Hid me. Protected me. I owed them my life. There was no phone. No contact. No way to send a letter or a voice message. The world thought I had vanished. Christy thought I had died. I understand that. But what I saw that day, her bare feet on the hardwood floor, the sound of another man's voice in the home we built, that was something I wasn't prepared for. And maybe I didn't handle it the way I should have. Before I left, Christy and I were good. She was everything I had ever prayed for, funny, loyal, nurturing. She made our little apartment feel like home. She used to tape sticky notes to my lunch container with things like, "Hurry home, handsome," or "One more day closer to your return." We had our fair share of disagreements, sure, money, time, the risks of my career, but nothing that felt like a deal-breaker. I truly believed we were stronger than most. The day I got my deployment orders, she tried to smile through the pain. She helped me pack. Washed my uniform twice even though it was already clean. Just come back home to me, she whispered into my neck the night before I left. I swear I will. I kissed her forehead. I know you will. God, I wish I could go back to that night. The first few months overseas were hell. The heat. The noise. The tension that lived in your bones. But every time I read one of her letters, always written in purple ink, something in me would settle. She'd write about the weather in Ohio, the way our dog Toby kept chewing the rug, how she started volunteering at the shelter again. Sometimes she'd send pictures of the backyard, or her standing in front of the tiny tomato plant we'd grown together. I wrote back just as much. When I could, I'd send voice recordings too. Just me, trying to sound normal even when I wasn't. Trying to hide the gunshots in the background. Trying to smile through blood-stained uniforms and lost friends. Then came the ambush. And after that, came the silence. They say the worst part about dying is knowing you won't get the chance to say goodbye. But I didn't die. Not that day. It was our fourth night in the Khost region. A classified recon operation, small team in deep enemy territory. I remember the stillness in the air that night, too quiet for a war zone. That should have been our first warning. We were moving in a staggered formation, 8 of us, heads low, when the ground shook. The explosion came from under the lead man. It ripped through him like paper. Then came the bullets, fast, blind, chaotic. I didn't see where they were coming from. Just the screams. Just the sound of my brothers falling one by one. I ran for cover behind a dry mud wall. My left leg felt like it was on fire. I looked down, blood. Shrapnel had torn through my thigh. My chest was heaving, vision blurry, the dust mixing with the blood on my face. Then, darkness. Not silence, just darkness. When I woke up, I thought I had crossed over. There was sunlight leaking through a tattered cloth above me. The air smelled like sheep and smoke. I couldn't move my leg, or my arm, or barely even speak. A boy, no older than 10, was sitting beside me, soaking a cloth and pressing it to my forehead. His eyes were wide, cautious, but kind. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. A woman entered the room, thin, weathered, with soft hands and a shawl over her head. She didn't speak English, but she nodded gently, pressed a finger to her lips, and gave me water. It took me weeks to understand where I was. An Afghan family, farmers, had found me unconscious near their goat field. They thought I was already dead. But the boys saw me blink. They carried me home and nursed me in secret. If the Taliban had known they were harboring an American soldier, they'd have been executed. All of them. Still, they chose to keep me hidden. I spent months in a dim corner of their home, unable to walk. My leg festered. My ribs were fractured. They used herbs I didn't know, prayers I didn't understand, and kindness I couldn't repay. There was no phone. No radio. No way to contact base or Christy or anyone. Every time I asked for help, even with gestures, the father would shake his head solemnly, his eyes heavy with fear. They saved me. But I was invisible. Not alive. Not dead. Just buried. Buried in a country that wasn't mine. Buried under silence and dust. And for a long time, I started to believe maybe this was what fate had chosen for me, to be forgotten. But even then, I still thought about Christy. What was she doing now? Did she think I was dead? Was she wearing black at my funeral, crying into folded flags? Or was she learning how to live without me? I didn't know. All I knew was that I was gone. And no one was coming to find me. The first time I stood on both feet again, I cried. Not because of the pain, though it was brutal. I cried because it felt like progress. Like I was finally clawing my way back from a grave I never agreed to be buried in. The Afghan family, I later learned their names, Malik, his wife Farah, their son Arif, treated me like a secret they couldn't afford to lose. They fed me when they barely had enough to eat. They kept me alive not for reward or recognition, but simply because they believed it was right. Once I was able to walk with a limp and whisper a few phrases, I started to ask, beg for help reaching out. Phone. I'd say, tapping the side of my head. Call. America. Wife. Malik just lowered his eyes. He was a kind man, but afraid. I understood. A single wrong step could mean his family's death. Still, I didn't stop trying. 16 months passed. 16 months of walking in circles inside the same four walls. Of healing wounds that wouldn't stay closed. Of drawing maps in the dirt, writing Christy's name over and over again on the inside of my arm with a dull stick. Eventually, Malik gave in. He took me to a trader 2 villages over, a man who owned a dusty satellite phone. It was risky. Dangerous. But I had worn him down with my pleading. I still remember the taste of the air that day, dry and metallic, but full of hope. I dialed Christy's number from memory. I had repeated it to myself every night like a prayer. The first time, it beeped, then came, "This number is no longer in service." The second time, again, "This number is no longer in service." I tried my brother's number. Same response. I stared at the phone like it had betrayed me. The trader told Malik something in Pashto. Malik turned to me and simply said, "Too long. Too late." I went numb. What does it mean when the people you love no longer leave a footprint for you to follow? Had she moved on? Changed her number? Left the city? Had she cried when they told her I was missing, or had she let the silence harden her heart and bury my memory? It took me 6 more months to plan my journey back. I didn't want Malik's family harmed, so I waited for the right time, a chance to slip through unnoticed. A foreign journalist helped me cross the border after I flagged him down with a crude SOS written on cloth. From there, it was a blur of military debriefings, red tape, psychological evaluations, and forms with boxes I didn't know how to check. I was labeled recovered. Lucky. Alive. But I didn't feel any of those things. I just wanted to go home. To Christy. To what we had. To whatever pieces were left. I landed in Ohio just after dawn on a cold Friday. No escort. No headlines. Just me and a military duffel bag. The air smelled like memory. I took the long walk to the house. I still remembered the creak in the 4th step, the way the porch light flickered when it rained, how she used to wait by the window with hot tea in her hand. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd open the door and cry again, this time with joy. Instead, I opened it. And met a man in my house. With my wife standing behind him. And the first thing she said was, "You were supposed to be dead." I don't remember walking into the living room. I just remember standing there, staring at a man who didn't belong. The mug in his hand trembled. I could see the steam still rising from it. He was taller than me. Younger. Confused. Shirtless, like he had rolled out of the bed that used to be mine. Christy stood behind him in a faded t-shirt I had bought her in New Orleans. Her arms were crossed, but her jaw was set. I kept waiting for her to scream, to cry, to run to me. But she didn't. She just whispered again, like the wind had stolen her voice, "You were supposed to be dead." I felt the words hit my chest like another explosion. Not joy. Not disbelief. Not, "Oh my God, Nat, you're alive." Just, disbelief that I was standing there at all. "Who the hell is this?" the man finally asked her, gesturing at me. I stared at him. "Who the hell are you?" I said, voice low. My hands were shaking, my knees were barely holding me up. "Christy, say something," I whispered. "Just, say something." She looked at me like I was a ghost she had buried and forgotten. Like her past had walked in and dragged mud all over her new life. I thought you were dead, Nat," she said again, her voice cracking this time. "I held a memorial. The army said you were missing for over 2 years. You didn't call. You didn't write. I thought you were gone." I blinked hard. I was injured. I barely made it back. "Christy," my voice broke. She looked down. "I didn't know what else to do," she muttered. "I waited, Nat. I did. But eventually, I had to move on. I couldn't live in limbo." My heart twisted in a way I didn't think was possible. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even cry. Then the man, he, stepped toward me. "I think you should go, man. You're upsetting her." That was it. The wrong words. At the wrong time. In the wrong house. What happened next? I wish I could erase it. But it's burned into my memory like shrapnel under skin. I snapped. All the years of silence. The blood. The pain. The goats. The grave. The dust. Her voice. I launched myself at him. We crashed into the glass coffee table. My fists found his jaw, his ribs, his cheekbone. I don't even know how many times I hit him, I just remember the way Christy screamed my name like she didn't recognize me. He stopped moving. Blood poured from his nose, his mouth. I stood over him, panting like a rabid dog, my knuckles torn open. Christy was crying now. "What did you do?" she screamed. "What did you do, Nat?" I looked at my hands. Then at the man on the floor, covered in blood. Then at the woman I thought had waited for me. The sirens came fast. Red and blue flashing in the windows. They dragged me out in cuffs. Christy didn't follow. She just stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, shaking, like I was the stranger. At the station, I didn't say much. What could I say? I came back from the dead to find my wife with another man. That doesn't fit on a police report. They charged me with attempted murder. The man lived, but barely. In court, Christy sat with him. Never looked at me once. The judge gave me 10 years. And just like that, I went from being a forgotten soldier to a convicted felon. Prison doesn't kill you fast. It kills you slow. With time. With the ticking of the same clock on the same wall. With the same tray of cold food passed through the same slot. With the same bed that always feels too short for your body, no matter how tightly you curl up. But what really kills you in prison is silence. And I was already familiar with that kind of death. The first night inside, I laid on the hard cot staring at the ceiling and trying to convince myself this was all a bad dream, that I hadn't gone to hell and come back only to be thrown into a cage like a wild dog. But it wasn't a dream. The ache in my ribs was real. The dried blood on my knuckles was real. The handcuffs. The judge. Christy's silence. The look in her eyes, like she didn't know me anymore. All real. She didn't come to visit. Not once. Only my brother came to visit. I wrote to her in the beginning. Letters I knew she'd never respond to, but I wrote them anyway. Christy, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I lost control. You were my reason to stay alive out there, and walking in to see you with him, I didn't know how to carry that pain. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Just tell me you understand why I broke. No reply. She never replied. After a while, I stopped writing. I got into a few fights early on in prison. Not because I wanted to, but because some people look at a quiet man and see a target. I didn't talk much. Didn't smile. I kept to myself, did what I was told. The guards didn't like me, but they respected the silence. I think they saw something in my eyes, something cold and far away. They gave me kitchen duty after 6 months. That's where I spent most of my days, slicing potatoes, scrubbing trays, listening to the echo of my own thoughts bouncing around steel walls. There was one guy, Jenkins, older man, in for armed robbery. He took a liking to me. You got that haunted look, he said once, handing me a cloth to wipe the counter. Like a man who's been shot twice and lived to regret both. I didn't answer. He didn't push. Sometimes that was enough. Time passed in blinks. Holidays came and went. I could always tell by the mood in the cafeteria, colder around Christmas, louder during the Super Bowl. I marked them on the back of my inmate handbook just to prove I was still counting. I started reading books about war, about healing, about God. I wasn't religious before, but something about being trapped makes you look for answers you never needed before. Then one day, 4 years into my sentence, everything changed. I was mopping the hallway near the common room when I looked up and froze. The TV was on, a news segment about a murder trial. I almost turned away, until I saw his face. The man. The same man I beat half to death in my home. The screen showed him in an orange jumpsuit, surrounded by deputies. The headline, Man Sentenced to Life for Murder of Partner. I stood there, mop dripping onto my shoes, heart pounding in my chest. They said her name, Christy Clay. They showed a photo of her smiling. Dead. Murdered. By him. My knees gave out. I leaned against the wall like someone had cut a wire in my back. The guard shouted at me to move, but I didn't hear him. The world had gone quiet again. Christy was gone. And the man who took everything from me had finally destroyed the last piece I had left. They gave us the day off in the kitchen after a boiler pipe burst. I should have been grateful. Instead, I sat on the edge of my bunk, eyes locked on the tiny grainy TV mounted near the ceiling in the common room, waiting for the news to repeat what I already knew. Christy was dead. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Not her. Not my Christy. She might have moved on, might have looked me in the eye and not recognized the man standing there, but she was still the woman I swore to love. Still the one I survived for. And now, she was gone. Gone before I could ever tell her that I forgave her. Gone before I could ask her to forgive me. I got the full story from Jenkins 2 days later. He read the article in the local paper while we scrubbed down the food prep station. He slid the folded paper across the table. I wiped my hands, picked it up. Brian S. Williams sentenced to life in prison for the murder of former partner, Christina Clay. Williams was found guilty of second-degree murder in the fatal stabbing of 33-year-old Christina Clay, who was pronounced dead at her Columbus home after neighbors reported a domestic dispute. Evidence presented included a history of emotional and physical abuse that I stopped reading. Everything around me faded. The fluorescent lights. The smell of bleach. The chatter of inmates behind me. My chest felt like it was being crushed. I wasn't sure if it was rage or shame. Christy had died alone. In that same house. With him. I used to dream about her sleeping safely in the arms of someone better. That if she had truly moved on, at least he would love her in the ways I didn't get the chance to anymore. But she hadn't found better. She found danger. And I hadn't protected her. I started seeing him everywhere. In my sleep. In my reflection. Sometimes I'd dream I was back in our house, walking up the stairs and hearing her scream from the bedroom. I'd run in, but the door would never open. And when it finally did, it was too late. She'd be lying on the floor. Still. Cold and gone. Weeks later, during yard hour, I saw him. Brian. In real life. He was being moved to a high-security block, but they marched him across the same corridor I was mopping. Our eyes locked. He looked gaunt. Pale. But alive. I don't know what I expected. Regret? Fear? Some kind of apology? He gave me nothing. He didn't remember me. The guard yanked his shoulder. He disappeared around the corner. I stood there gripping the mop like a weapon. My arms shook, but I didn't move. What would it solve? Christy was still gone. That night I sat on my bunk, wide awake, staring at the cinder block wall like it held the answers I couldn't find anywhere else. I whispered, "I'm sorry," into the darkness. Not just for what I did. But for not being there. For surviving only to fail her again. For letting the rage speak louder than love. They say time heals. But they don't tell you that grief has its own clock. One that moves backward, forward, and sometimes stands completely still. And behind these walls, I had nothing but time. They let me out 2 years early for good behavior. Some would call that a blessing. But walking out of that prison didn't feel like freedom. It felt like stepping into a world that had stopped needing me a long time ago. My brother came to pick me. They gave me a bag with the few belongings I'd earned, mostly books, letters I never sent, and an old photograph of me and Christy from before the war. Back when we still smiled like the future was ours. The wind felt unfamiliar on my skin as we drove home. My brother's home felt safe. But the nights were hard. I'd sit on my bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what Christy's last thoughts were. Did she scream my name? Did she wish I had come sooner? Did she forgive me? Sometimes I'd press her photo to my chest and cry without sound. I went to therapy once a week. Court ordered, but I kept going even after the hours were complete. My therapist, Dr. Whitaker, wasn't the warm, fuzzy type. She looked at me like she knew I was lying even before I spoke. "Have you forgiven her?" she asked during one session. I stared at the window. "I don't know." She waited. Didn't fill the silence. "I forgave her for moving on," I said finally. "But not for not waiting. Not for letting him in. Anne. I can't forgive myself for what happened after." "You're holding two weights at once, Nat," she said. "Eventually, one of them's going to crush you." One afternoon, I decided to visit our old street. It took everything in me to stay upright. The house was up for sale now. A fresh coat of paint on the door. New curtains. But the ghosts were still there. I saw Christy on the porch in my mind, laughing, barefoot, waving at me while holding a cup of tea. That memory hit harder than the funeral photos I'd seen in the newspaper. Because that's how I wanted to remember her. Before war. Before betrayal. Before blood. I didn't go back after that. I knew if I stayed too close, I'd drown in what-ifs. I took a job at a shipping yard an hour outside the city. Quiet work. Heavy lifting. No uniforms. No guns. No questions. I moved out of my brother's and rented a small studio above a garage. It had creaky floors, a bed that sank in the middle, and a cracked mirror in the bathroom. But it was mine. And it was quiet. Sometimes too quiet. People think freedom is about walking out the gate. But real freedom is learning how to live again when everything you lived for is gone. And I hadn't figured that part out yet. Then I read the letter that she never sent. It came from a box I almost threw away. I had gone to clear out the last of my things at my brother's place in Akron. Months after I was declared missing in action, Christy had sent some of my belongings to my brother. The box was taped up, dusty, and water-stained from years of neglect in his garage. "Could be nothing," my brother said. "But I figured you'd want to go through it." I waited a few days before opening it. I wasn't ready. Then one night, after too many sleepless hours staring at the ceiling, I tore the tape off and opened it. Inside was an old army jacket. A cracked phone I didn't recognize. A book of poetry I once gave Christy on our 3rd anniversary. And under that, an envelope with my name on it. Nat written in her handwriting. Slanted, soft, and familiar. The kind of handwriting that used to write "I miss you" on napkins and "love you" always on sticky notes. I sat down, hands trembling. I almost couldn't read it. But I did. Nat. If you're reading this, then somehow, some way, you came back. And I don't know what to do with that thought, because I spent years trying to accept the idea that you never would. I waited, Nat. I did. I waited until hope became a form of torture. Until the quiet in our house felt like it was trying to swallow me. Until every letter stopped coming and every night felt like a funeral. But I never stopped loving you. When they told me you were gone, I stopped breathing for days. I broke. And then I met someone. I didn't plan it. I didn't even want it. But I was drowning. And he felt like a rope. At first. But over time, I realized he was just another weight. He wasn't you. He didn't know how to calm my storms. He didn't listen. He got angry fast. He drank more than he talked. But I kept telling myself it was better than being alone. The night I wrote this, he pushed me. For the first time. Over something small, I don't even remember what. And I sat on the kitchen floor, holding a picture of us, and crying so hard I thought I'd choke on it. I wanted to run. But I had nowhere to go. I kept thinking, if you had lived, would we have made it? Would we still be dancing in the living room to old songs and laughing at stupid movies? Would we still be us? If this letter never reaches you, please know I never stopped loving you. Not really. Even when I couldn't wait anymore, you were still the man I dreamed about coming home to. Forgive me. Christy. I sat on the floor, holding the letter like it was the last piece of her I'd ever touch. Tears spilled before I realized I was crying. Not the kind that falls softly, but the kind that come from a place buried so deep inside you, you forgot it existed. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that she loved me until the end, or the fact that I wasn't there to save her from what she'd become trapped in. I clutched the paper to my chest like a child holding onto something precious in the dark. And for the first time in years, I let myself say it out loud, I forgive you, Christy. The cemetery was quiet. No wind, no birds, no distant traffic, just silence, as if the earth itself knew it was a place where hearts came to speak the unspeakable. I hadn't been here since I got out. Maybe I was afraid. Maybe I thought she didn't deserve a visit. But after the letter, after her words softened the jagged edge I'd carried for years, I knew I couldn't leave that weight untouched any longer. I found her grave under a maple tree, a modest headstone, nothing fancy, just her name and the years she lived. I knelt beside it, unsure what to say. I had practiced in my head for days. Angry words. Sad words. Bitter questions. But none of it came out. Just silence. So I pulled out the letter, the one she'd written me but never sent, and I placed it gently on her grave. I pressed a stone on it to keep it from blowing away. I got it, I whispered. I read every word. I sat back on the grass. I hated you for a long time, I said. And I hated myself more. For not dying. For not coming sooner. For not saving you. I looked up at the tree above us. Its branches reached like arms toward the sky. I don't know if I'll ever stop being broken, Christy. But I think, maybe it's time I try to live again. For both of us. I stayed there for hours. No phone. No music. Just the sound of my own breathing and the wind finally coming back. And when I finally stood, something in me felt different, not healed. But, lighter. In the months that followed, I started writing again. Just pieces, fragments of memories, half-finished poems, and journal entries about the war, the pain, the prison, the return. I started going to a veterans group every Thursday. Most of us were more silent than we were talkative, but we understood each other in ways words couldn't reach. I got a dog, a rescue mutt with one eye and a limp. I named him Chance. He never left my side. Just like the pain. But also, just like the hope. Sometimes I still hear her voice in my dreams. Sometimes I wake up sweating, thinking I'm back in the desert or behind bars. But sometimes I wake up, look at the morning light, and think, I'm still here. And that means something. I didn't come back the same man who left. War changed me. Love broke me. Grief nearly buried me. But I'm still breathing. Still trying. Back from the dead. Still broken. But, alive. The end. And that brings us to the end of today's story. What are your thoughts? What would you have done in that situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments, we read every single one. Your perspective matters, and we love hearing how these stories connect with you. If this story moved you, inspired you, or even shocked you, don't forget to like the video, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss another true life tale from Whispers of Reality. We have more powerful stories coming your way, real stories that deserve to be heard. Until next time, keep listening to the whispers.